On July 6, 2026, something happened at the World Cup that had nothing to do with a goal, a save, or a red card, and everything to do with a phone call. A sitting president picked up the phone, dialed the head of FIFA, and asked him to review a suspension handed to an American striker. Less than 72 hours later, that suspension was gone. The player took the field against Belgium, the internet lost its mind, and by the time the final whistle blew in Seattle, the story wasn't really about the scoreline anymore. It was about whether the world's biggest football tournament could still call itself fair. Belgium ended up thrashing the United States 4-1 in the round of 16, and that result alone would have been a massive story on its own. A co-host nation eliminated in the first knockout round in front of its own fans. But layer in a presidential phone call, a furious response from UEFA, and a Belgian federation openly mocking the White House afterward, and you get one of the strangest 48 hours in World Cup history. So what actually happened here, and what does it mean for the rest of this tournament? Let's get into it. If you're new here, this channel breaks down everything happening behind the scenes at the 2026 World Cup, so stick around, and if you want more of this kind of coverage, go ahead and subscribe before we continue. To understand why this became such a big deal, you have to go back to July 1st, when the United States beat Bosnia and Herzegovina 2-0 in the round of 32. American striker Folarin Balogun scored the opening goal in that match, and up to that point, he'd been arguably the breakout star of the tournament for the U.S., scoring in every game he'd played. But in the 64th minute, referee Rafael Klaus was sent to the video review monitor. The replay showed Balogun coming down on the ankle of Bosnian defender Tarik Muharemovic during a challenge. Klaus reviewed the footage and issued a straight red card. Under FIFA's rules, that's automatic. A red card at the World Cup normally means an immediate one-match suspension. No appeal, no exceptions. That's been the standard for over 60 years. Balogun was set to miss the round of 16 clash with Belgium, and American fans were furious, worried their best attacking option would be sidelined for the biggest game of the tournament so far. Here's where things get interesting. Reports emerged that President Trump called FIFA President Gianni Infantino directly, asking him to review the red card. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and White House World Cup Task Force Director Andrew Giuliani, both of whom were at the Bosnia game, reportedly helped push the case to FIFA on the American side. Then, on Sunday, July 5th, just one day before the Belgium match, FIFA announced something that hadn't happened at a World Cup in decades. Citing Article 27 of its disciplinary code, FIFA suspended the automatic ban for a probationary period of 1 year, along with a $40,000 fine. Balogun was cleared to play against Belgium. According to reporting from Fortune, it was the first time since 1962 that a red card during the tournament didn't result in the player missing the next match. Now this is where things change. FIFA's own statutes explicitly prohibit political interference in football matters. So when a head of state calls the FIFA president days before a ruling that directly benefits his own country's team, people are going to ask questions, and they did, immediately. UEFA, European football's governing body, released a statement saying FIFA had, in their words, crossed a line, calling the reversal unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable. That's about as sharp as an official football body gets in public. The Royal Belgian Football Association said it was astonished and filed an appeal against the reversal. FIFA rejected that appeal on the grounds that Belgium wasn't technically a party to the original disciplinary proceedings, so it had no standing to challenge the outcome. Belgium's head coach, Rudi Garcia, didn't hide his frustration. At a press conference, he joked that it felt like April Fool's Day had arrived 4 months late. For what it's worth, this wasn't the very first time FIFA has used Article 27 to suspend a disciplinary measure. Similar suspensions were lifted for Kenya in 2022 and Zimbabwe in 2023, but those involved federation-level sanctions, not an active red card suspension in the middle of a World Cup with a foreign president personally requesting the review. That's the distinction critics keep coming back to. It's not that FIFA has never used this rule, it's that it's the first time it's been used this way, on this stage, with this level of political involvement, in the sport's most watched event. Infantino, for his part, didn't deny the call took place. He said in a statement that he regularly hears from heads of state, government officials, and football stakeholders around the world, and that FIFA's judicial bodies remain independent regardless of who reaches out. He also pointed out that Neil Eggleston, the American chairperson of FIFA's appeal committee, wasn't involved in the decision to reject Belgium's challenge, seemingly an attempt to head off accusations of bias before they spread further. But the bigger issue for a lot of observers wasn't whether the committee was technically independent on paper. It was the optics of a sitting president calling for a ruling that directly benefited his country's team, in a sport where FIFA has spent decades insisting it keeps politics out of the game.
Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this breakdown, tap that subscribe button. We're covering every controversy, every twist, and every storyline from this World Cup as it happens, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now here's the part that made everything even messier. FIFA's decision didn't just affect one player, it opened a door that other federations immediately noticed. The French Football Federation announced Monday that it was appealing a yellow card shown to midfielder Michael Olise during France's round of 32 win over Paraguay, asking FIFA to rescind it. France insisted the appeal had nothing to do with the BELGIUM situation, but the timing was hard to ignore. England manager Thomas Tuchel was also asked directly after his team's 3-2 win over Mexico whether he'd consider challenging a red card shown to one of his own players given what had just happened with the US. That's the real ripple effect here. Once FIFA showed it was willing to suspend a suspension under enough pressure, every federation with a grievance suddenly had a reason to test the system. Whether or not that leads to more reversals, the precedent is now out there. And for a tournament built on the idea of one consistent rulebook applied equally to every team, that's a genuinely bigger issue than a single red card. As for the actual football, Belgium didn't need any help settling the argument on the pitch. Charles de Ketelaere opened the scoring inside the first 10 minutes after the US failed to clear a ball out of danger, and he added a second not long after with a well-taken finish. Malik Tillman pulled one back for the Americans with a well-struck free kick, and for a moment there was a sense the US could claw its way back into the game. That hope didn't last. In the 57th minute, US goalkeeper Matt Freese made a costly error that gifted Belgium a third goal through Hans Vanaken. Shortly after, Christian Pulisic went off with an apparent injury, capping a rough night for the Americans' biggest names. Veteran striker Romelu Lukaku, brought on as a substitute, added a fourth goal deep into second-half stoppage time, sealing a 4-1 result that left no room for debate about which team deserved to advance. Balogun himself, the player at the center of this entire controversy, was on the pitch for the full match, but he wasn't able to change the outcome. For all the noise around his eligibility, the game itself was decided by defending, not by disciplinary committees. After the final whistle, Belgium's official team account posted a photo referencing the controversy with the caption simply, "Overturn this," a pointed jab at both Trump and FIFA that spread quickly across football social media. Think about it. The team that had spent days publicly objecting to the reversal ended up settling the matter in the most direct way possible, on the scoreboard. For American fans, this loss stung on more than one level. Many players were seen in tears on the pitch after the final whistle, and reports from the stadium described a similar mood among supporters who had shown up expecting a deep tournament run on home soil. There's something particularly hard about a co-host going out this early. The United States wasn't just another participant here. It was one of 3 nations, alongside Mexico and Canada, hosting matches across the continent for this expanded 48-team tournament. And, in a twist nobody predicted before the tournament started, all 3 co-hosts were eliminated at the round of 16 stage. Mexico and Canada bowed out before the US did, and now, for the first time in World Cup history, none of the host nations made it past the first knockout round. Add to that the fact that also, for the first time ever, neither Germany, Brazil, nor Italy made it to the quarterfinals, and this World Cup is already being remembered as one where a lot of the traditional giants stumbled early. For neutral fans, that's produced a mix of reactions. Some are genuinely disappointed to see fewer heavyweight matchups in the knockout rounds. Others, especially those uneasy about the political controversy, admitted that there was a certain amount of satisfaction watching the situation resolve itself on the field regardless of what happened off it. That's worth sitting with. If you haven't already, now's a good time to hit subscribe because we're going to be tracking how this story develops as the tournament heads into the quarterfinals, and there's likely more to come. Looking ahead, the bigger question hanging over FIFA is what this moment does to its credibility going forward. This tournament isn't just the biggest World Cup by team count, it's also one of the most commercially significant events in sports history. Reports estimate roughly 7 billion views across digital and broadcast platforms, with brands expected to spend over $10 billion around the event. Advertisers aren't just buying attention, they're buying the perception that this competition is fair and consistent. A controversy like this, however it eventually gets resolved in the public conversation, chips away at that perception a little, and sponsors tend to notice things like that. There's also Gianni Infantino's own position to consider. He's up for re-election as FIFA president in March 2027, and this episode has already given plenty of ammunition to critics who've raised concerns about FIFA's governance in the past, particularly given the organization's history with corruption scandals over the last decade. The best-case scenario for FIFA here is probably that this fades quickly, the tournament produces a genuinely thrilling final few weeks, and the football itself ends up being what people remember most. Belgium, for their part, now moves on to face Spain in the quarterfinals, a matchup that's likely to draw plenty of attention regardless of the controversy that preceded it. The more uncomfortable scenario is that this becomes a reference point, the moment other federations and other governments point to whenever they want to argue that the rules can bend under enough pressure. Given that France and England were already testing the waters within 24 hours, that possibility doesn't feel far-fetched. Either way, FIFA has set a precedent it can't fully take back. Whether that precedent gets used again in this tournament or waits until the next one is something we'll likely find out sooner rather than later. So, let's bring it all together. A red card became a phone call became a reversal became a controversy that pulled in UEFA, the French Federation, the England manager, and eventually Belgium's own social media team. And through all of it, the actual football still had the final word, with Belgium winning comfortably and the United States heading home earlier than anyone in that stadium wanted. What stands out most here isn't really about any one country or any one president. It's about how fragile the idea of a neutral, apolitical World Cup can be once one exception gets made, and how quickly other teams notice.